Hey everyone, it's Taylor with the Daily Again. Let's get into it. In this video, we're going to talk about HR 3884, which is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act for short. And it was introduced by Representative Nadler of New York on July 23rd of 2019. So this thing has been out there for a while. And the first thing that this bill is going to do is it's going to decriminalize all marijuana, or everything that has to do with marijuana, by taking it off of the DEA's controlled substance schedule. Now, right now, marijuana is a Schedule 1 controlled substance. That means it has no medical value and it is a high chance of abuse. So this very first part of this act is going to take off marijuana from any schedule whatsoever, not just downgrade it, but remove it altogether. It's also going to require that a bunch of demographic data be taken on businesses that open up, that take advantage of this act. So people that are going to sell marijuana, they have to report all kinds of demographics about their employees and themselves, just for data for the government to see who's taking part in this business. Now, there's going to be no identifying data, so no street addresses or specific names, but things like race, gender, ethnicity, all that stuff is going to be taken down and reported to the government. Undoubtedly, when people talk about legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana, they get to the subject of taxes, and this bill is no different. It imposes an 8% tax on all marijuana transactions. The only way to get out of this tax is to be an exclusive research center. You cannot sell it at all. It is exclusively for research. Now, if you do commit fraud and you don't pay this tax, you could be subject to a $10,000 fine and a 10% tax on top of that, as well as legal fees and things like that, or even jail time up to 5 years. Now, on top of reporting all of your demographics and this tax, each business that's going to take part in the marijuana economy has to register as a business with the federal government. They pay a $1,000 registration fee, and then they're allowed to sell or export marijuana. If you do not pay this $1,000 registration fee, you're subject to a $5,000 fine and potentially 2 years in prison. Now, for all those people wondering about, can I grow my own? Yes, this bill does take care of that, and it says you can grow your own, but you cannot sell it whatsoever, or you'll be subject to all these penalties and all these taxes and things like that. So you can grow your own marijuana. Once again, you cannot sell it at all. Another requirement of this bill is that any packaging for marijuana does not have any immoral or indecent packaging or symbols or images or anything like that. Now, I know that there's a certain stigma and a certain connotation with the types of people, or maybe the types of images that are used when dealing with marijuana. And it's interesting that at a federal level, they're saying no indecent or immoral packaging at all. It's just a really interesting requirement that they're saying, hey, we're going to decriminalize it, but make sure that it's still kind of clean and reserved. There's also a special section in this bill that's going to require the SBA, or the Small Business Administration, to administer loans or marijuana-based businesses that are legitimate businesses. So they're at least trying to invest in this marijuana industry. The federal government is, at least. So it's really nice to see that the federal government is not saying that we're not just going to decriminalize it, we're going to try to support it and maybe get some more cash flow moving and a lot of people moving more money. Now, I know that a lot of people have different feelings about that, but from an economic standpoint, that makes a lot of sense if this bill gets enacted. Now, the last thing, but certainly not the least thing, is that this bill takes care of expunging non-violent cannabis-based crimes. Not 1 year after the enactment of this bill, the federal government will go back and they will look at cannabis-based crimes that were non-violent, and then they will completely expunge them and release those people from prison. That's a really good thing when people just get busted, with a little bit of marijuana and it really wasn't that violent or anything like that, and they still get these huge long prison sentences. I know that they exist. It's just ignorant to say that they don't, but it's kind of sad when something so small affects somebody's life in such a huge way. There are some interesting findings at the beginning, and two of them that I really want to touch on. One of them is about the amount of money in legal cannabis sales, and this bill says that about $9 billion of legal cannabis transactions happen right now. And in 2022, that's expected to grow up to $23 billion. Now, if you make cannabis much more accessible to a lot more people by enacting things like this act, you're going to increase the amount of money that is flowing through that economy. and potentially through a lot more people's pockets and enriching a lot more people. Now, I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing to get money from marijuana. That's for you to decide, but it is an outcome that could potentially happen. Also, I want to touch on them saying that there's about 600,000 arrests that happen on cannabis-based crimes. That is a lot of time and material being invested into cannabis prohibition laws. Now, once again, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that is totally up to you, but it is a large amount of resources that could potentially be diverted somewhere else if something like this were to pass. Now, I know there are a lot of passionate people on both sides of this argument, legalize, not legalize, and I want to hear from you guys. Make sure you drop me a comment, educate me, because I am definitely not the most educated on this subject. I do know a lot from this bill, and I learned a lot from this bill, and I can speak to it pretty well from this one piece of legislation. But as far as greater issues, larger pressing factors, things like that, I really don't know a whole lot about. Like the medical benefits of marijuana. I know that there's a lot of debate on that topic. I don't know a lot about it. I also don't know a ton about some of the criminal offenses that go on with marijuana, things like that. Violent crimes with marijuana, that type of thing. So I want to hear from both sides. If you've got an opinion, definitely let me know. Shoot me something on Twitter, drop me a comment. As always, like, subscribe, share, everything. I appreciate everybody that watches, and have a good one, guys.